If you didn't feel just a little for a teary-eyed Rachel Reeves yesterday, you've got a heart of stone. Yes, we've all seen the pictures and the videos, and they've already become defining images of this government. Whilst the Treasury has been briefing about an unspecified personal matter, and some have noted a strange altercation with the Speaker of the House of Commons, the clear wider context is that this week the Chancellor became a Chino. Chancellor in name only. Well, my name's Tom Harwood and this is GBN Originals. Don't forget to click that subscribe button to keep up to date with this rather chaotic government. I'm under so much pressure. Those are the words Reeves reportedly said to a colleague before taking that fateful seat in the eye of the country. Public pressure had already forced a U-turn, of course, on the winter fuel payment cuts. Then Labour backbenchers rejected Reeves's plan to trim ballooning benefits spending. The days-long double U-turn fiasco of the benefits bill shaved a hoped-for savings down from $5 billion, down to $2.5 billion, and finally to minus $100 million. Yes, the climb down is humiliating for the Prime Minister, but a clear personal blow to the Chancellor. It's she who'll have to return to the dispatch box in the autumn and announce billions upon billions in higher taxes. With every PIP benefit reduction stripped from the PIP benefit reduction bill, all that remained in this once flagship piece of legislation were tweaks to the health element of universal credit, saving roughly £1.7 billion, paired with a rise in the basic UC rate. That adds a £1.8 billion spend in extra spending. Now, the government rushed this bill to a vote in a desperate attempt to save money, and in the end, ended up spending an extra $100 million instead. Well, as the tearful Chancellor stared into the middle distance yesterday, the markets decided she looked like a defeated woman. The price of servicing government debt climbed to ever new highs. The economist Julian Jessop estimated that the whole sorry show knocked 1% off the value of the pound and added between 5 and 10 basis points to the cost of UK government borrowing. All due to a few tears. Well, the markets expressed what the rest of us could see. First, the public and now Parliament have a clear and insatiable desire for ever higher public spending without the revenue to pay for it. Thanks to the climb down, between today and 2030, the amount spent on disability benefits alone will balloon by £13 billion. Now, sometimes it's hard to understand what that actually means in reality. What does £13 billion mean? Well, that's an extra £1,000 that needs to be taken from 13 million people in tax. The Chancellor had hoped to slow the growth in the budget to a mere £8 billion increase, but both Reeves and Starmer failed to convince a largely innumerate lump of Labour MPs of the necessity of these spending cuts. Well, shortly after the government's humiliating climb down, Huffington Post's Kevin Schofield reported one Labour MP as being heard saying, "I don't understand why this means tax rises when it's only a few billion pounds." Only a few billion pounds.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living, and maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade, and in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney. Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Yes, the chaotic coalition that makes up the Labour Party hasn't been able to come together to agree that there's something fishy going on. Despite the alarming data showing how enhanced PIP payments, now that's the highest level of PIP, personal independence payments, including the mobility component that you can trade in for a brand new free car, they've ballooned between 2019 and today in 2025. Yes, these claims for autism, they've gone up from over 26,000 to over 114,000 in that 6-year period. Claims for anxiety and depression, once 23,000 up to 110,000. ADHD in 2019, 4,000 up to 37,000 today. And claims for obesity, once 2,000 in 2019, up to over 11,000 today in 2025. And yes, that was obesity. You can claim the highest level of disability benefits in this country just for being fat. Well, Labour MPs have failed to come together and recognise the insanity of a system that has led to the free and tax-exempt car scheme Motability, through which enhanced PIP recipients can choose brand new cars for free or massively discounted models of swankier cars, including BMWs, Mercedes and Audis. That now takes up almost 1 in 5 new car sales in the UK. Take a look at this astonishing graph from Bloomberg. It's an absolutely astonishing chart, showing astonishing expansion of this government scheme. Now, Motability cars even come with insurance, servicing and breakdown cover all included, so not a penny has to be paid by an enhanced rate PIP recipient for their brand new car, fresh from the showroom. It's a mess. It's all a mess. Thousands more are signing on to these benefits every single day, screened only by an assessor at the end of a telephone line. And that assessor is actually financially rewarded for approving more cases more quickly. Now, to her credit, the Chancellor has time and time again tried to do the right thing. She tried to cut universal welfare to a wealthy cohort. She tried to curb the exploding benefits bill. She wanted her first tax-hiking budget, and it did raise a lot of tax, to be her last tax-raising budget. She wanted to meet future fiscal pressures with spending restraint rather than yet more tax hikes on a country that has never been taxed more. And yet it was extreme Labour MPs, those same MPs who can't wrap their head around what the word billion means, well, they've made that mission impossible for her. But something else has too. Yes, this all comes down to growth. The miserable state of British politics cannot be separated from one gruelling fact. The economy has flatlined since 2008. Unlike in the United States, productivity, now that's output divided by hours worked, it's never returned to pre-crisis trend levels. That's despite repeated Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts that Britain will return to higher productivity growth. Well, we haven't. Which all leads to this thoroughly depressing hedgehog chart. Can you guess why it looks like a hedgehog? Well, it's been produced by JP Morgan, and it shows the expectation after expectation, those are those dotted lines, of forecasted higher productivity growth, and then compared to that thick black line, the flatlining reality. Well, had productivity grown in line with previous trends, tax revenues would be higher by tens of billions of pounds. The Chancellor wouldn't have necessarily felt the need to borrow to the very limit of her fiscal rules, a strategy so precarious that it leads the most minor OBR forecast revision to cause budget crises for the government. And this is serious. Had Reeves, and frankly the Tory chancellors before her too, felt able to leave a bigger fiscal buffer, or heaven forfend, a balanced budget, no one would think the OBR was running the country. The much-hated Quango is only as influential as it is today if the country is at the very brim of its borrowing budget. In a world where the Chancellor doesn't see it as his or her duty to borrow to the hilt, the supposed power of the OBR vanishes in a puff of smoke. Suddenly it doesn't matter that they've revised their notoriously unreliable growth forecasts or that some world event has sent revenue south. The closer to the borrowing limit a Chancellor becomes, the more powerful the Office for Budget Responsibility appears to be. And that in the end is why the Chancellor was scrambling to find these now abandoned welfare cuts. But just imagine how different things would have been when it comes to growth if Britain looked less like Europe and more like America. Imagine the Chancellor had strong growth and consequently more options. Far fewer crises would dominate the news cycle, and the slush fund of growth-induced cash would grease the wheels of serious public sector reform. Trying to reform public services with only sticks and no carrot does not a happy public sector make. No, it's simply staggering to see the difference in productivity growth between the United States and Britain since the crash. Through the 2000s to 2008, the trends of two countries matched one another. That's the United Kingdom and the United States. But since the global financial crisis, there's been a great divergence. Perhaps most interestingly of all is the way that European economies and the United States respond to a recession. See in this Financial Times graph how productivity fell in Britain and Europe in 2008 and 2009, but soared upwards in the United States. Yes, America's weaker employment protections mean that in recessions, firms let more people go. Firms become leaner and more productive. Meanwhile, in Europe, jobs seem to be prioritised above everything else, leading to bloated zombie firms and markedly lower labour productivity. The European fear of allowing companies to let employees go necessarily reduces dynamism in an economy. Sticky workers means less chopping and changing, less discovery of higher productivity or better matched jobs. This effect is about to get worse thanks to Labour's Employment Rights Bill. It could well be that Britain prioritised keeping zombie firms afloat over the creative destruction necessary for productivity gains. But there are other factors to consider too. Stay with me here, because we're about to get on a London-centric tangent. Yes, it's hard to stress just how important London is to the British economy. The average salary in London is £10,000 a year higher than the average salary in the northeast of England. If more people from the northeast chose to take jobs in London rather than, say, Newcastle, their measured productivity would increase significantly. They'd earn more money for the hours that they work, and the Treasury would take in more tax too. But there's a key reason beyond sentimentality that people from non-London choose to move to London. Almost all of that extra money earned would be lost through higher housing costs. The Institute for Fiscal Studies estimates that the average worker in London earns 14% more than the average worker across the country. But when you take housing costs into account, this gap collapses to just 1% more. London's housing crisis is Britain's productivity crisis. And why might this have a peculiar effect, specifically after the year 2008? Well, it could be thanks to one fascinating coincidence. London's population first peaked in the late 1930s and didn't recover that same population level until the 2010s. Now, this is important because in the post-war years, a huge array of restrictions were placed on how cities like London were allowed to grow. A green, or some people would say grey belt, was established preventing outwards growth of London. And the Discretionary Town and Country Planning Act enabled local objections to often prevent redevelopment and densification within the city itself. Now, this doesn't matter for productivity in the late 20th century in London, as the city had already been built to house 9 million people. It expanded rapidly through the Victorian era right up until the war, and as Londoners left after 1939, the acute housing pressures were obviously not particularly harshly felt. There wasn't the demand there to make them felt. That is, of course, until London reached its previous 9 million population again. Now this time, unlike before, London's newly growing population had nothing to grow into. When the population soared before the war, the city was able to grow with it, to keep those housing costs low. But now the population continues to grow and the city is artificially constrained, both outwards, but more importantly, upwards too. This lack of supply pushes costs higher and higher. and cuts the real income boost that Brits would receive if they moved to more productive jobs. This doesn't, of course, mean that an ever-expanding footprint of London is inevitable. Let's compare actual lived density in London to the centre of cities like Paris or Barcelona, where 6 or 7-storey streets are the norm, and that tops 50,000 people in 1 square kilometre without a tower block in sight. That's a beautiful and human gentle density. Meanwhile, in London, the very densest square kilometres are home to barely 20,000 people. And the densest areas are places like Marylebone, full of attractive urban 6 or 7-storey mansion blocks, built before the war, and then Clement Attlee put a stop to it all. Well, the Chancellor, to her credit, has been one of the most vigorous around the cabinet table to fix the planning nightmare that holds back so many new homes, roads, railways, power lines and everything else that in this country is simply too hard to build. But she's fighting against enormous institutional inertia. Yes, it's not just the houses we can't build. More than the post-2008 London housing problem, there's been a post-2008 infrastructure problem too. Many economists argue that Britain made a bad decision in the post-crash world to not take advantage of the era of low interest rates to build more infrastructure when it was far cheaper to borrow the money to do so. But this misses a key point. The taxpayers spent many billions of pounds on infrastructure in the post-crash era. From HS2 to Crossrail, projects did go ahead, and incredibly expensively at that. In 2018, Britain was second only to China for rail infrastructure expenditure as a percentage of GDP. It's just that in Britain, these kind of projects are more expensive to build than just about anywhere else in the world. The problem is that our money doesn't go very far, not that we don't spend enough. Not least due to the indulgence of NIMBYism that led to the coalition government in 2012 announcing miles more unnecessary tunnelling and, of course, the Natural England mandated 125 million HS2 bat mitigation tunnel. Look it up. Well, I would not envy anyone in the position of the Chancellor today. Presiding over such a fundamentally broken economy and prevented by her party's own backbenchers from making the cuts they need to stay above the waterline. But how would you resolve these seemingly intractable problems? Do get involved in the comments section down below. And remember to click that subscribe button to stay up to date with this chaotic government.